Hi. So let's talk about how, as a writer, I bring in evidence to support my thesis in an argument essay. What I'd like to do is I'd like to take you through three paragraphs where an author brought in three separate sources to support their thesis. I'll show how they establish a context, use the source to support the point, and circle back around to supporting the thesis. At the end of this video, what I'd like to do is point out a few things about the quality of the sources. What establishes a solid or a high quality source, and what could be a little bit better. So stick with me and we'll see what shakes out in the next few examples. Hi. So let's pick up where we left off with the last essay. This is the one about the stay-at-home moms. What the author will do in this case is they'll take the introductory sentences and establish a premise of how motherhood has been seen through history. Then, what they will do is they'll lay out an argument and then address that argument with evidence. So let's begin by reading together and looking at how this comes about. Here's the introduction, or introductory sentence. Throughout history, society has looked upon the male as the breadwinner and one expected to work and support a family. The mother has been viewed as the nurturer, the one to stay home and raise the children. During the 1960s, women wanted more rights, power, and the ability to get higher paying jobs. Women were given this right, so they expressed this newfound freedom by going to work outside the home. As women sought employment, their children were left to the care of babysitters and daycare workers. Now, right there is the premise for the argument. Whether or not you agree or disagree with this is not entirely relevant, but this is how this author has chosen to go about making this case. If this works for you, then they're doing a fine job. If this argument is putting you off, then they're not doing the job. They're not empathizing the way that would effectively support their point. But this is what they've done. Let's push on. Now they're going to make their case. Because society has redefined the role of a mother to be one who is an important element in the workforce, the loss of the mother in the home has led to the decline of the family union and therefore to society. This forfeiture has created a generation for whom social morals and values were not as important as they once were. All right, so here is the central idea of the argument. Okay, they're going to talk about it, the change in morals. Not that anyone is immoral, but there is a change. Perhaps, the author goes on to say, this is due to a working mother being absent from the home where she is unable to personally instill these ethical standards in her children, thus leaving her children to receive their value system from strangers. Okay, now we can start to see the author's value from strangers. I like that they're using this charged language. Whether or not I agree with this point or not, it's words like values from strangers that's going to help me as a reader begin to see their point of view. I also like that they didn't speak in absolutes. They open the door for interpretations. They say, perhaps this is due. And then they move on to this value charged language here. I think this is a good piece of writing for this sentence. Society truly does begin at home, asserts Sybil Neiman. So, in order to return to a culture with better morals and values, the importance of the role of the stay-at-home mother should be restored. There we go, cause and effect. Loss of values. Bring in the quote. Therefore, stay-at-home mothers should be restored. Okay. In this way, the stay-at-home mothers can improve society. So now they've circled back around to the thesis. It is disappointing when mothers are devalued for staying at home to raise their children. Richard Lowry states, there is something valuable in a mother's caring for her own child. Again, a direct quote, then supported by a citation. And we can talk about the proper formatting for this citation later. In general, No one can take care of your child in the same way his or her mother would. A mother's care is usually superior to the daycare since she naturally wants what is best for her child. So, again, a little cause and effect moment right here where we talk about how a value is different in one place than another. It sticks to the author's main point. I like this interpretation piece. According to a nonpartisan public agenda survey in 2000, roughly 80% of parents with children 5 and younger say stay-at-home parent is the best able to give their children the affection and attention that they need, as quoted by the source. Nicely played. One of the things that I would do as a writer is I would offer an interpretation right after the quote, so to give it another context and bring it back to the point. But this was a nicely chosen quote. A mother, I'm sorry, a mother's individual care can also curb the aggression that is evident in daycare centers. A study done by the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development reports that kids in non-maternal care tend to be associated with qualities such as gets in lots of fights, cruelty, explosive behavior, talking too much, argues a lot, and demands a lot of attention, as quoted in Lowry again. Teachers who work in a preschool environment like my daughter are frustrated with how badly the children usually behave. Workers in daycare are governed by strict rules which prevent the disciplining children the way the one can do at home. This causes a disregard and loss of respect for others because many children grow up thinking that they do what they want. Today, many younger generations act like they are owed something. In the workplace, it is shocking to see the way they treat others with their degrading manners and think there is nothing wrong with their behavior. They also tend to have a lazy work ethic and cop an attitude when asked to do anything extra. This makes it difficult for many employers to find hardworking and respectful employees. Okay, so let's take this last paragraph by pieces where they brought in these direct quotes that have some large value charged language. Nobody wants to see fights. Nobody wants to see cruelty. Nobody wants to see explosive behavior. So this was an aptly chosen selection of quotes. One of the things to note is that it seems to come from a reputable source in the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. This sounds pretty good. Sounds like a reputable source, and it sounds like explosive behavior and arguing a lot may not be one of the things that I would value. Therefore, strong inclusion of a source that may be compelling. I would see as a reader that the author's point is valid. Where they come off the rails a little bit um, is then making this leap to workforce behavior, and that's an argument for a little bit further down the road. I think they probably stretch themselves a little bit too far, but when it comes to folding in a source that gets a reaction out of me, I think this is their strongest. I think these in the previous paragraphs, I'm not sure what makes this Lowry or the who was it Neiman a expert source. That part is yet undefined. I really liked the idea that there was a national institute as a source. That worked on me. Whether or not they are valuable or not still remains to be seen. All right. So that, in a nutshell, is how in 3 paragraphs the author brought in 3 separate sources to back up their point. Okay. So in conclusion, when it comes to bringing in evidence, 3 things need to happen. The first is the evidence needs to support the premise in just that paragraph. Everything in the paragraph has to relate specifically. The evidence has to tie into the premise in the paragraph. It can't be some interesting thing that'll come out later on. It has to close out the paragraph. 2, it needs to be credible. The author's opinion is valuable, it's important, and it's respected. But if the evidence that is coming in doesn't add to it, make that point stronger, then it doesn't belong there. The evidence has to be greater than just the author's opinion. And third, and this is crucial for argument writing, that paragraph where the evidence is brought in has to circle back and close out by coming back to the thesis. You need to keep reminding the audience of the validity of the thesis. And that's it. That's bringing in evidence. Sometimes in a paragraph, you'll need to bring in 2 or 3 different pieces of evidence to support one idea, depending on the complexity of the idea. In the case that we just saw, one source, one idea, simple, direct, and clear.